Well, good morning, North Tarrant Church. My name is Scott Johnson. I'm the lead pastor here at North Tarrant Church. And I want to invite you to do me a favor. You know, every Sunday morning, we roll into Lizzie Curtis Elementary School. We set up environments for preschoolers, for elementary, for middle school, for high school kids. We've got an incredible band and experiences for adults. And not only that, we have remarkable people in the parking lot and the atrium all the way through, ready to greet you, to call you by name, and to make sure that Sunday is the best day of your week. I would love for you to join us next Sunday at Lizzie Curtis Elementary School at 10 a.m. as we get the chance to catapult our week, to celebrate together, and to think about, what does it really look like to follow after Jesus? Now, as the pastor, our mission as a church is to lead people, to inspire people to follow after Jesus. And I want you to know, I've seen time and time again how following Jesus can make your life better, and it can make you better at life. And in the course of all of life, we've seen this from teenagers to elementary to preschoolers, and we love the opportunity of inspiring each and every person that comes to join us, to inspire them to take a step in their faith journey. Hey, now today we are in a series entitled The Wrong Why, and I am excited. I mean, we all know the what's that we want to achieve, and we all kind of have a how regarding how we want to do it. But today, I want to invite you as we figure out, what is the why? What is the why behind our what, and what is the why behind our how that makes things go wow? Hey, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next Sunday at 10 a.m. at Lizzie Curtis Elementary School.
Most of my discussions with people about what they want to do or finding God's will, discovering God's will for their life have to do with work. And so this is what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about work and career in this framework. And if you haven't been here, I'll catch you up on the framework in a second, because we focus on what and how, and maybe some of you had some aspirations in a certain career, in certain work, and you've ended up somewhere. And some of you are wondering if where you ended up is where God wants you to be, or if it's what God was leading you to, or what God has for you. And if you're not a Jesus follower, maybe you don't think about it in those terms, but you still wonder, is this what I was meant to do? Is this where I was meant to be? And if you find yourself in a dead-end career, or a job you never dreamed, or you're dissatisfied or unfulfilled, or on the other side of that, you're wildly successful and you're doing really great, and you're still wondering, there has to be more, right? Like there has to be more than this. As we conclude this series today, I want to talk about that tension as it relates to our work. Because here's one of the things I know. I know that all of us, these are sort of the given. Most of us, you want to be successful. I mean, if you didn't want to be successful, you're probably not showing up today. You're not here. You're not showing up to work. And if, by the way, if you don't want to be successful, you could probably skip out on the rest of the talk. You probably don't need any of this. But you want to be successful, and you don't only want to be successful. I know your desires are more than that. You want to feel fulfilled in what you're doing. You want it to be filling for you. You want it to mean something. You want it to be something that's sort of like, this is what I was meant to do. Now, when I think about people who were meant to do something, there's an image that comes to mind. You can see if you agree with me or not. I don't think there's a better illustration of somebody who was meant to do something than Michael Phelps. Let's just take his anatomy for a second. He's got an 80-inch wingspan. He's got a long torso like a seal. He's like part fish. He's got short legs. He's got this exceptional lung capacity. It was like he was destined to be an Olympian. Like he was destined to just be a juggernaut in the water. And here's the thing. You look at him and you go, oh my goodness, like he was designed, he was created. Like when you watch him swim in the water, it seems effortless. You're like, this is what he was meant to do. I mean, he's got hands like paddles and feet like flippers, and he just glides through the water. The problem is most of us on a day-to-day, we don't feel like we're gliding through life and work like that. Most of us feel more like this person, which I don't know if you know who this is, but this is just the first piece of encouragement for today. If you find yourself in a job that doesn't feel very purposeful or meaningful, there are people that are lifeguards at Olympic events. Speaking of people whose jobs are not really purposeful. And I mean that, no offense, if you're one of those people, I apologize, but I just never understood that. Here's what's interesting though. Most of us wonder what it would feel like to be Michael Phelps, but if some of you know his story, if you were to talk to Michael Phelps, you know that Michael Phelps, when he was at the top of his sport, he didn't feel like the way we thought Michael Phelps should feel. He didn't feel fulfilled. In fact, after becoming the most successful, most decorated, most accomplished Olympian of all time, in his own words, Michael Phelps said that he felt lost. Imagine that. How is that possible? I mean, he did it the right way too, right? I mean, when you think about how to accomplish what you should accomplish, it's like, hey, it requires hard work. If you're gonna be successful and you're gonna be fulfilled, I mean, you gotta do hard work. And certainly he did a lot of hard work. He committed his life to excellence in the pool. He sacrificed significantly. Not only that, I'm sure there were plenty of challenges along the way. And he persevered through those things, through difficulty and through challenges. And yet still, on the other side of that, as successful as he was, it seemed like all of the hard work and the sacrifice and the persevering paid off, and yet he feels lost. I mean, you would think that would be fulfilling. But this is the point of our series. That's what happens when you focus on just the what and the how. Our question in this series is why, and interestingly enough, this is the question Michael Phelps was asking. It's actually the linchpin, as we've said in previous weeks, between the what and how. And the truth is Michael Phelps came to a place where he's going, I mean, did any of this really matter? Does this matter? I've achieved immeasurable, at least for people who do what he does, immeasurable fame. It was certainly financially lucrative for him. He amassed a significant amount of wealth in the midst of this. And his power and influence, when he showed up, anywhere, everybody wants to hear from, everybody wants to know, everybody wants a piece of Michael Phelps. But for him, what did it matter? Was the momentary fame and fortune worth it? You see, for Michael Phelps, he was longing for and wanting to discover something that I want to talk about today. He was trying to discover what is the purpose and the meaning of what I've poured my life into. What's the purpose and the meaning of my work? The ideology of this world leads us in this direction. And it's okay if this is a little bit challenging to you, but I just want us to be really honest. We're in church, God is watching, so don't lie to yourself. Isn't it true? These are the drivers most of the time. And this is what we want, but we're told if we get that, we'll experience this. And if we get this, then we'll feel fulfilled, we'll feel successful. And this idea of purpose and meaning, believe it or not, is something that Jesus was very interested in. As a matter of fact, if you have a Bible, Matthew chapter 5. Matthew is one of 4 accounts of Jesus' life, and Matthew chapter 5 begins what's known as the Sermon on the Mount. If you don't have a Bible, we'd love to give you one, by the way. You can go to the guest services team on the way out today, and you can pick up a Bible. It's for free. There's no cost. There's no strings attached. But I'd love for you to have a Bible. Matthew chapter 5 is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. This is where Jesus began teaching his followers, or people who were interested in being followers. And what's amazing about this is some of them were already following. Some of them weren't sure if they wanted to follow or not. And Jesus said, hey, listen, if you want to follow me, I have purpose for you. And I want to tell you the purpose and the meaning behind what I want you to do as followers and who I want you to be as followers of mine. He begins this way in verse 13. He says, you are the salt of the earth. He's obviously using a metaphor. You're the salt of the earth. Now, most of you have heard this phrase before, salt of the earth. You didn't know that Jesus was the one who started this. People say it all the time. Oh yeah, he's the salt of the earth. Jesus, that started with Jesus. It was a positive thing. You're the salt of the earth. And it's like there's something about that. There's a preservative, there's a flavor that those people bring that it's just good. But he says, but what good is salt if it has lost its flavor? Can you make it salty again? The truth is it'll be thrown out and trampled underfoot. It's worthless. If salt isn't salty anymore, this is to the point, it has no purpose. It has no meaning. It's insignificant. He goes on, he says, you're not only the salt of the earth, you're the light of the world. So you're salt and you're light. This is another example of purpose and meaning. And he says, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl, meaning neither do people treat light in the same way salt that's lost its saltiness. Neither do people put light under a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. If a light isn't illuminating things and salt isn't salty, what purpose does that have? What significance does that have? And then Jesus, looking at his followers, he says, look, in the same way as salt and light, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds. And let me pause right here. Your translation may say good work or good works, which actually is a better translation. I sort of like the New Living Translation. As some of you know, the Bible is translated from Hebrew and Greek into English, and there's several different translations and different linguistic things that translate differently. But this idea, go back really quick, where it says good deeds, that word actually means work. It's the word in the New Testament, ergon. And so what he's saying is good work. And this word ergon in the New Testament is an interesting word that Matthew chooses. And here's why I bring this up. It's not because I want you to think I'm smart and I know a bunch of Greek. You can Google any of this like that. You can know all this stuff in the same way as me. This is what's interesting about this word ergon. It literally is the word in Greek for business and employment and occupation. See, I'd heard this most of the time in my life. It's like, oh, the sum total of your good works. Like you should be the light of the world and do a bunch of good deeds in life and a bunch of good things. I don't think that's a great translation because the word there is actually about, this is what you put your hands to on a regular basis. I think this is more concerning like the work that you do in society and in life. Amongst the Hebrew people, obviously they didn't use Greek language, and the Hebrew equivalent to this Greek word is this word avodah right here. And avodah, this is so interesting in the Hebrew culture. It's translated work, but it can also be translated worship or service. This is something that we have a hard time wrapping our minds around, but this term was used by the Hebrew people to describe both agriculture and construction. Some of you remember Nehemiah, who rebuilt the walls around Israel. So that there's an Old Testament story about that. When they talked about that work, they used this word avodah. It was used in agriculture about plowing fields. That work was used. They used this word avodah. It's also the word that was used for the work that the high priest of Israel would do in the temple. When once a year on Yom Kippur, he would go into the temple and he would make a sacrifice for all of the nation of Israel. This was part of the law. He would go and he'd make a sacrifice for the sins of the whole nation of Israel and ask God for his grace and his mercy. When he would go and do that work, the word that was used to describe that work was avodah. It's also the word that was used for loving and serving your neighbor, the work that you do to do that. He says, look, in the same way, let your light shine before others that they'll see your good work, your avodah, your work. And here's what happened. They'll glorify your Father in heaven. See, if you want to begin to understand God's will for your life, again, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you consider yourself a Jesus follower or not, if you want to begin to understand what God's will for your life is, God's will has to include good work. And here's why. That's what you were designed for. You were designed to do good work. Now, this isn't just in one passage by Jesus. As I told you, this idea of work and good work, it's all throughout the scriptures. As a matter of fact, it starts in the very beginning in Genesis chapter 1. Now, you don't need to turn there, but just really quick. In the beginning, some of you remember God when he was in the creation story, when he's creating the world. He creates, on day 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6. He works and works and works and works for 6 days. And at the end of each day, at the end of his creation, he calls his work good. Let's try that again. He calls his work good. It's okay to talk in church, by the way. I know Andy doesn't like it when you talk, but I'm okay if you talk. You can talk back to me. Unless you have an objection, just save that for the end. We'll deal with that at the end. But this is what happened in the beginning. God's work, he declared it as good. This is what's wild is then God places the man and his wife, Adam and Eve, in the garden, and he gives them work to do, good work to do. And it's creative work. I want you to create. I want you to fill the earth. I want you to make babies. I want you to procreate. Not only that, he gave them leadership work. I want you to subdue and rule over all of the animals. I want you to give them names. I want you to create order in the world. And God gave them work. Sometimes we feel like work is the curse of the fall. It's like because there's sin in the world, we have to work. That's not the case. The reason we work is because we were created in the image of God. And God was doing good work before we showed up. And you were created in his image, and part of your purpose and meaning, part of your design was to do good work or to do good works. And what happens is when you do good works, you point people towards God and you glorify God. You point people towards him. You reflect him. You cause other people to see the good work that you're doing. And this pure work that when God described his work as good, it was pure of evil. And Jesus is building on this idea saying, when you do good works, you point to your creator. You point to the one who designed you. Now, the Apostle Paul in the New Testament, building on what Jesus taught, and again, we did this last week as well. I want you to see this is not an idea that's just isolated with Jesus or something that's some obscure passage in the Old Testament. It's something Jesus reintroduced that was there in the beginning and the Apostle Paul carried on in the New Testament church as the new believers. And building on this idea, the Apostle Paul talks about how we do this good work. In Colossians chapter 3, you don't have to turn there. We're just going to look at a couple of verses. He's instructing them on all sorts of different roles. In Colossians chapter 3, he's talking to husbands and wives. He's talking to bosses. He's talking to parents. He's talking to slaves and masters. And then he takes all of these roles that were present in their culture at the time. He's talking to all these people, and he gives them all of them, one very specific thing to do when it comes to their role. And he says this, he says, whatever you do. Now, it doesn't matter what specifically you're doing. You may like it, you may not like it. You may be doing it just to pay the bills. It may seem like a necessary evil to you, but regardless of what you do, whatever you're doing right now, probably even especially if you don't consider yourself a Jesus follower, I would say, I just want you to consider thinking about doing this. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart. Let me just ask you, I wonder what would happen if you did that. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing right now, what if you just made the commitment to yourself that whatever you were doing, you were gonna show up and you were gonna do it with all of your heart. Again, regardless of what the job is. Some of you are going, oh no, but hold on a second. You know how terrible my job is. You've obviously never met my boss. Like, my boss is terrible. And if you had met my boss, you'd be like, no, you shouldn't work with all of your heart for your boss. They're not worth it. Like, they're crooked, they're mean, they're only out for themselves, whatever it is. And the funny thing is the Apostle Paul doesn't give us any qualifiers. He says, no, stop all that. Whatever you do, work at it with your whole heart. It's not about your boss. It's not about how you're being treated. It's not about the culture or the climate of your work. Work at it with all your heart. Look at this. As working for the Lord, not for human masters. You have a new master. You have a new boss. You've surrendered your life to a new authority. And the Lord is your ultimate authority in your life. He's the one that you're serving. So whatever you do, what if you were to do it as if you were working for the Lord? I just say this, I don't do this too often. I said that a couple weeks ago, but I'm gonna do it again today. I just want to press just a little bit further. This is for some of you today. Like, the reality is some of you are thinking, I deserve a promotion. You've sort of started coasting. You're not giving your all the time because you haven't been given back to. You haven't been promoted. You haven't been given what you've earned, or you're waiting for that next thing or somebody to pluck you out of what you're in the middle of to take you into something else and get a better job or get a better career or climb up the ladder. But my question for you is if the Lord's the one you serve and he sees everything, if you were him who sees everything and you were watching you each day, would you promote you? Would you promote you based on the way you show up and what you give and how you serve each day? If you're serving the Lord, you should do that. You should show up and serve every day. The Apostle Paul says, since, and here's why you should do it, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. Even if you're not getting the reward from your boss or from your company, or you didn't get the promotion you want, you're working as unto the Lord, and he has promised you an inheritance. He has promised to reward you for the work, the good work that you do. Now, see if you can follow this. This is sort of wordy, but this is how it works in my mind. I just wonder if we could truly get what we've been promised to get, I think we wouldn't be as focused on trying to get. If we truly could wrap our minds around what's been promised to us to receive, to get an inheritance, the way God's promised to reward us for good work, I don't think we'd be so focused on trying to get things and squeeze things out of this life. I think we'd be freed up to give and to serve. And then tying into this idea of the slave master idea, you have a new master. He says, after all, it is the Lord Christ you are serving. And I love that he uses these two words for Jesus' name. It is the Lord, meaning you have a new master who is Christ, who is also your Savior. This is not about doing good work so you can be saved. It's not doing good work to be in favor with God. It's because you've surrendered to a new master who has more for you. He's created you for more. He's already rescued you and freed you from the things that would hold you back from living out the purpose he has for you. So when you do whatever it is that you do it with your whole heart. Show up and bring everything that you have. This is what I love about this phrase, this idea of with all of your heart or with your whole heart. In the Hebrew culture, this meant everything you have, everything inside of you. I'll just tell you, this is how I believe that you discover God's will for your life, is you show up and you bring your whole heart, you bring everything that you have. Now, I just need to say this real quick. The Bible, the scriptures, they represent the known will of God in our lives. Like, they serve as guardrails. There's an unknown personal will that God has for every single one of you, which, by the way, if you didn't have a Bible and you wanted a Bible today, this is the one you'd get that we have out at the guest services desk. But the principles and the precepts and the teaching that's in this serve as guardrails to God's unknown personal will in our lives. God has a known will that he's set out for us, but he has a personal known will for you. And I borrowed this from somebody else, but submitting submitting to the known will of God, submitting to his word, it paves the way to discovering the unknown will of God, the unknown personal will of God. And if you're at odds or you're outside of God's known will, it's really difficult. In fact, it's almost impossible to discover God's unknown, personal, specific will for your life. If you're not working and serving with your whole heart, with everything inside of you, if you're not working with everything inside of you, it's gonna be really difficult to discern what the next step is in God's will for your life. So I wanna make this super practical, and I wanna make this super easy for you, because I want you to be able to discern the next step. I want you to know, if I'm following God's will for my life, what does that look like? And I kind of got myself run out of space here, but if you know what a Venn diagram is, it's just basically where things overlap. And I think there's 4 circles that represent 4 things in our lives that we've all been gifted with, that you've all been gifted with. You've been gifted with a personality. Some of you like your personality. Some of you don't. You've been gifted with a personality, though. You have a unique personality. You've been gifted with certain passions and desires. You've been gifted with people in your life that have influenced you along the way, and a network of relationships. And you don't like this one, but you've been gifted with a past as well. And you've been uniquely gifted, unique to anybody else in this room. And God has a specific, unique purpose for the way in which he's gifted you in life. At the center of this is how we discover God's purpose and design. You have a personality and passions. There's people involved in your life and your past, and these things, where they overlap, I believe God uses all of this to lead us to this deep sense of significance and purpose and meaning in our lives. God uses everything. And if you find yourself wanting more, I'll just say this today, if you want more purpose and meaning in your life, somebody may tell you to be content. I don't think that's the purpose of when we're told in the scriptures to be content. I don't want you to dumb down or lower your desires or shrink those down. I think wanting more is consistent with something that God places in all of us, a greater sense of purpose and meaning. One of my favorite authors, C.S. Lewis, he's also a theologian, and he's written fiction and nonfiction work, and I love what he says. He says, it would seem that the Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us. I love this, because I think this is the point here. When you work with your whole heart, when you show up with everything you got and you go, hey, this is my assignment. Whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm in the middle of today, this is my assignment, and I'm gonna bring that, and I'm gonna bring that, and I'm gonna do good work, because that's what I was created to do. I was created to do good work, and that good work, I'm gonna experience God's purpose and meaning in my life. I'm gonna glorify God. And this is, in the words of C.S. Lewis, what is a result of that is what we all really are after. We're all really pursuing in our lives. We're after this infinite joy of knowing I'm in the center of exactly what God wants me to do, where he wants me to be.
Creations, his pride and adoration, treasures woven by his love. His careful hands, they hold us safe within his promise of calling and of destiny. We're heaven's spun creations, his pride and adoration, treasures woven by his love. His careful hands, they hold us safe within his promise, the calling and of destiny. see the day that you made.